Welcome to Slash Forward. In this episode, we're going to make some definitive forward progress with Phantasm IV, Oblivion. Let's get to it. We open on headlights this time and a mortuary, until we see the headlights belong to a hearse being driven by Mike. Then we get the series recap we've grown so accustomed to. It's like coming home. This leads up to Mike running off to fight his transformation, with Reggie being left behind, a captive in the catacombs. Tim's whereabouts are unknown. The tall man plays with Reggie a bit before indicating it's time to start the endgame, releasing him and then leaving. We return to Mike, having a wistful dream about the perfect day before the tall man's arrival, spent stealing frozen treats and likely vandalizing public property. He's so wrapped up in this, he barely notices he's playing inadvertent chicken with a semi. He cleans his pants and continues on, plagued by the occasional vision. Reggie is doing some maintenance on the Cuda when Jody shows up. He wants Reggie to go after Mike, but he confirms that he's done with that life. Jody can't even convince him with the enticement of a warm vision of a perfect bohemian existence that never was. Mike finds he has a visitor who's taking control of the motor coach. Mike gives up trying to get control and looks instead to all the work he'll get done in his self-driving car while the tall man disappears into a casket. Meanwhile, Reggie gets pulled over. When the officer takes too long to return, he does some investigating, finding the real officer folded up in the trunk, like so. He's then attacked by some sort of zombie brute. He manages to lock himself in, and when the big oaf tries to come in from the roof, fires off the shotty. They do a quick and sexy puke swap, and then Reggie sticks a road flare in the gas tank, killing the big guy, and I guess we'd want to say putting the officer in the trunk out of his misery? The next morning, we see that Mike has made it to Death Valley. He gets out to walk around and appears to be at high risk of a Gorn attack. He hangs out until the sun goes down and does a little exploring, finding subtle hints from the tall man trying to convince him to become one of his kind. We then transition back to Reggie, being very careful to make sure the coast is clear so no one coming in connects him to the smelly no-no he left behind. In a surprising bit of character development, he sees a lost woman and elects to drive off rather than trying to hump her. Michael makes an attempt at escape. He seems strangely scared to fall even though he put in all this effort. He does fall, however, and finds that he did too good of a job. Despite this, his fate is in the tall man's hands and he refuses to let him die. He insists on him helping with his errands.
We have things to do.
But Mike instead creates his own doorway and jumps through. He ends up in a strange laboratory. Outside, he finds a perfectly genial tall man sipping on a poor man's lemonade and surmising that Mike must have come through the gate he was working on. Mike runs off but finds he's woefully ignorant of the trappings of science, only discovering by happenstance that the gears are the key to interdimensional travel. This leads him to a field of possibilities. Reggie continues on, apparently having stopped for 20 minutes to drop another deuce, because he eventually comes upon the car he previously left ahead of. Unfortunately, his face flirting works too well, resulting in a rollover accident. Feeling some responsibility for the predicament, he offers to help her along. Back in the desert, we find Mike working on the hearse and otherwise enjoying his time in Death Valley. Although, this movie is about 3 laptops away from becoming a Neil Breen film. Jody shows up and we discover that Mike doesn't fully trust him for reasons not entirely clear. In the end, we get an indication that Mike is not fixing the hearse, but building his own rudimentary orb. Meanwhile, Reggie and Jennifer find the Skeezius motel available and break in for the night. They get cozy and set some mood lighting as Reggie fills her in on what's been going on with him. We watch him employ his standard moves, which never work, and he goes to bed frustrated. He has a dream that he's in a graveyard and wanders into the tall grass. And Mike's there. He awakes to Jen's alluring body doing some unusual stuff. Now, I don't know much about how ladies work, but I'm not sure whatever's going on here is something to be excited about. Called it! One of the orbs forcibly penetrates his hand, and then he discovers the tuning fork to be a reliable weapon. Mike considers the possibility of going to the beginning to prevent the tall man from becoming Lord of the Dead, but the tall man is in control and sends him to a desolate future instead. Jody finds him there and they run off, while Reggie, in the original dimension, climbs a mountain and finds the hearse. He cosplays as classic Reggie and approaches at nightfall, finding the site littered with dwarves that he has to blast, demonstrating his now battle-hardened grip. Mike and Jody pop out to greet him, with Mike subtly telling Reg not to trust Jody, and Reggie subtly palming him the tuning fork. Then they go back to the beginning. They stand around and watch as the tall man prepares for the final experiment. Mike leaps in to stab him at the last second, only to find he can't interfere because they're in different dimensions. When the true tall man returns, they flee. Mike plays it real cool, leaning on a tree and waiting for the double cross. When it comes, he stabs Jody, but then is grabbed by another Jody, and ends up finding himself on the tall man's table where, after all this time, all it really took was for someone to mildly press his shoulders down. He then gets his dome sawed. However, the tuning fork allows Mike to hit the pause button, taking care of Jody before having his toy taken. So he runs back through the gate. When the tall man appears, he completely dominates Reggie. Mike distracts him with his custom orb, which is just phase 1. Phase 2 is the bright, shiny light he knows the tall man won't be able to resist gazing upon. This is the precursor to the hearse exploding, engulfing the tall man in flames. Unfortunately, the tall man just respawns and casually removes Mike's mind orb. Reggie, unwilling to let Mike go, runs off after the tall man for a little interdimensional warfare. And that was Phantasm IV, Vacation in the Desert, the penultimate film in the series. Next week, we'll bring the series to a close. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.